Welcome everyone, our friends, our alumni, our colleagues to this special Mason Science Series event. I'm Cody Edwards. I have the pleasure of serving as the interim dean of the College of Science and also, I suppose, the de facto MC of tonight's activity. So I'm excited to be here as always, and I know you are as well. This event is co-sponsored by the College of Science and the College of Science Alumni Chapter, which is led by our very, very good friend, Michelle Ryan. And so we thank you, Michelle, for that. That is certainly fantastic of you. You're always great to support the College of Science and George Mason University. And as you know, the Mason Science Series focuses on the cutting edge research that the College of Science faculty is conducting. And we always, and again, those of you that have attended these for years, or maybe this is your first time, you will see exactly what I'm talking about tonight. It is always the cream of the crop of our researchers, not just in the impacts of the research they're doing, but also how interesting their research is. And that's sometimes very difficult to do, right? We may think something is very interesting, but does the general public, friends and colleagues that may not be scientists, do they think it is of interest and impactful? You'll certainly see that the answer to that is a resounding yes tonight. And afterwards, I hope everyone will join us for more hors d'oeuvres, more drinks, circulating, asking more questions, just general engagement. So please do stick around for that. A little bit of housekeeping before I introduce our speaker. This event is being recorded by GMU TV and will be available for additional viewing after the event on the College of Science website. So if you have some reason that you don't want your face on TV, be careful. If you've been semi let go from something or something, you may not want to be on TV, right? I don't know. So just be very careful and be warned. Okay, I don't want to hear any complaints. You were warned. I'm excited today to welcome Professor Harbir Antil as our guest for today's series. Over the next hour, Professor Antil and I will have a conversation about his work at the Center for Mathematics and Artificial Intelligence. And because we put acronyms on everything, the acronym is CMAI. All right, so you'll know what that is. And his talk will be on digital twins, which again, if you don't know what that is, stay tuned. It's incredibly fascinating. CMAI is one of our 16 research centers residing within the College of Science. Let me talk a little bit about the center. The center was founded by Harbir in 2020 to provide unique learning experiences for students and postdocs and to foster ties between academia, the national laboratory, industry, and government. The center focuses on artificial intelligence, digital twins, big data, neuromorphic imaging, control optimization, and nonlinear partial differential equations with a broad range of applications. Right? Yes, I know. I was thinking about that myself. It's like, what in the world is that? The center is funded by George Mason University, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and the Air Force Office of Science Research, the Army Research Office, and the Department of Navy. CMAI's advisory board includes several national and international academic institutions, national labs, both DOE and DOD, industries, including Black Sky, MathWorks, the Aerospace Corporation, Simula, which is in Norway, the center's weekly colloquium, which features guest speakers from all over the world, has a worldwide following of over 1,100 scientists from 60 countries. It also organizes multiple annual workshops. Harbir was telling me about 3 exciting ones that are coming up in the next 6 months, so always busy, that's for certain. And the center publishes over 50 research publications every year, which would be amazing for an entire department. But to see that come from one center is truly remarkable, particularly when they are in the journals that you see them in and have the impact that they do on science. And lastly, it is known for finding excellent placements for students in R1 academic institutions national labs and in industry. And frankly, I know I'll speak for Harbir in that that's probably the most important thing, and the thing that he's proudest of is his work and his mentorship of students. And he is indeed one of the College of Science's finest mentors. Now let me welcome and introduce Dr. Harbir Antil. Harbir is the founder and director of CMAI and a professor in the Department of Mathematical Sciences. His research is supported by numerous organizations, including those who support his center that I mentioned previously. He's a member of the Intelligent Science Technology Expert Group at the National Academy of Sciences, and he is the president of the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia section of the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, SIAM. His research and work have been featured in numerous publications, including most of the top SIM journals, Journal of Optimization Theory and Application. He serves as the editor-in-chief of Advances in Continuous and Discrete Models. As you can imagine, just from this introduction, he's given a number of plenary and keynote talks, including recent talks at Capitol Hill and to the US government. And he has taught at various national and international special schools. Harbir has helped create various MOUs between George Mason University and top national and international institutions to bring the best talent to GMU. This includes a recent MOU between George Mason University and the University of Concepcion in Chile. Also another one between GMU and Johns Hopkins University. Harbir received his PhD from the University of Houston and spent time at Rice University and the University of Maryland, College Park, before joining us at George Mason University. Now, please welcome me in giving a fond and excited welcome to Harbir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Dr. Edwards, for this really humbling introduction about our center and about our research group. I mean, you hit the point or the ball home by saying that everything that we have accomplished is actually with the help of my great colleagues. So two of them are here, Professor Maria Emelianenko, who is our department chair so my tenure department is Department of Mathematics, and also my colleague, Dr. Igor Griva, who is here as well. Both of them actually hired me in 2012, so I hope that was a good decision, so thank you. But I also work very closely with many other colleagues in the department, but also in college, including Dr. Edwards and Audrey, and her team, Leslie, Franklin. So thank you for putting this event together. It's a great experience and a great honor to be here in this company. So my background is more in physics, actually, but that's where I started. So I did my undergrad in physics, then I switched over to mathematics. But I also still go back to physics. So I even though I do my mathematics now, write theorems, but I still dabble into real problems. That's where my real interest lies. And that's what I'm going to discuss today. So here are some of our sponsors. So we are funded currently by National Science Foundation, Office of Naval Research, Air Force Office of Scientific Research, Department of Energy. So these are all the ongoing programs or ongoing projects. And we recently had also funding from DARPA. The project just ended. And the last one is Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So I can barely see it, but I think that's the logo or the seal. So now the question is, what is digital twin, right? Let's go back 55 years ago. Everybody's probably seen the movie or have heard the line, right? Houston, we have a problem. So that was the Apollo 13 mission, right? How did they actually manage to fix the problem? You can look at the module on the left, and you can see the damage, right? And it was significant damage. So how did they actually fix this problem? how they managed to fix this is they transmitted the data from space to Earth, and then they put that data or did the data assimilation into their simulators, which you see on the right. And these are the simulators in Houston. And then they combined this data with whatever knowledge they had of physics at that time, because this spacecraft is traveling, right? So it's not just you can get away with just feeding the data. You also need to recreate the scenario that is happening up in the space, thousands of miles away. So and then so this was data coming down, and then there was a feedback as well. So they transmitted data up, right? So and they were able to fix the problem and bring the astronauts safely home, right? So what we notice is, so this is one of the first example of a twin. It's in this case, it's actually a twin. There's no like a real twin, like a digital twin, but there is an actual twin, which are these simulators that you see on the right hand side. So, but there is also data, and also there is some physics, some equations that they solved in the background, and there was a feedback. So that's sort of the paradigm that I want to discuss with you guys today. We have a physical asset, we have data, which may be collected using some sensors, for instance. Then we have a digital model. This could be a family of models, maybe not just one model, right? If you see the picture over there is not just one simulator, there is a family, there is several simulators that they actually used. And then there is a feedback. In this example, the feedback was transmitting this data up, right? What we have recently done is put a more mathematical structure behind this paradigm, which somewhat existed before, and we were tasked to do this by National Science Foundation. We organized a workshop in December 2023, and we wrote a report, which you can find online. It's open source, and one of the goals there was to create how do you define a digital twin? What does it mean, right? Simultaneously, there was another report produced by National Academy, which is also available online. So in many cases, actually, you can cast these problems as optimization problems, and I'm going to elaborate on that with the help of certain applications. But also, there is a significant amount of uncertainty, right? There is so much that can go wrong. So how do you account for uncertainty? You may have error in your sensor measurements. There may be many faulty sensors, right? Or data may be corrupted, or you may have 2 points in your data. How do you make decisions out of that? And what we notice just with this application, you cannot just work in vacuum. As mathematicians, we tend to sit in our office sometimes and close our door. But if you want to work with these applications, you really have to collaborate with a domain scientists. So there has to be like a significant collaboration. And can we actually build an infrastructure to carry out those collaborations? And that's what we have managed to do under our center with the help of Department of Mathematics and also College of Science and GMU in general. All right, so this is, the name of the game here is combining data with physics. But let me now talk about last decade or so, where the emphasis has been largely on data, right? Which is basically leading us to this notion of machine learning. So what we understand by machine learning these days is more like supervised learning or unsupervised learning, or the so-called reinforcement learning. And the goal is to train something like a neural network to do a certain task. And these are really good at, for instance, pattern recognition, where they have seen significant amount of success. People are also trying to use this to solve equations. Like there are neural networks called physics-informed neural networks. They have seen some success, but I think there is a lot more work that needs to be done. But I feel the primary success is in the area of pattern recognition. And then we can talk about artificial intelligence. What do we mean by AI these days? AI, typically, what we mean is large language models, right? Here, the premise is somewhat different, because you train your networks very differently. You train it in all sorts of data in an unsupervised manner. Then you train it again on a specific task in a supervised way. And they operate more like languages. That's why we call them large language models, because they are trying to fill in if you do autocorrection, right, when you're typing on your computer, that's sort of what they're trying to do. Of course, they're not good for everything, but they're good for several things. I have heard from some of my colleagues that they're using it to write recommendation letters. I mean, as professors, we have to write a lot of recommendation letters. I have not used it myself, but I've seen letters written by ChatGPT, actually. They're extremely polished, right? So maybe I'm not encouraging people to use it that way. All right, so now let's be a little bit critical, right? So we've heard the news already 3 or 4 weeks ago that people in China, or this small company in China, managed to catch up to us. How did they manage to do that, and where are we lagging? So here we are discussing maybe we need to build a data center of the size of Manhattan, right? But let's be critical, in my opinion. What they did was did investment in basic science, in algorithmic development, in basic mathematics, and they were pushed to do that because they didn't have access to the most advanced GPUs that we have access to here, right? So I think if we want to keep on making progress, I feel so one take-home message for today is we need to invest more in basic sciences and algorithmic development. Of course, there are many challenges also that comes with machine learning. There is challenge with the bias in data. So typically, if you go and ask, let's say, one of the OpenAI to draw a picture of a person writing with right hand, right? Most of the time, it's going to draw a picture. Ask a ChatGPT or one of the OpenAI software to draw a person writing with left hand. Most of the time, it's going to draw a picture with the right-handed person. And it's going to do this because most of the pictures online are of right-handed people, especially when they're writing. So there's a bias when you're training these neural networks. Precision is a big challenge, right? So especially the engineering application that I'm going to discuss, think about your possibility of arrival if you take a flight. You're not going to take a flight if your possibility of arrival is 95%, right? You want to have a probability or the possibility which is like 99.99%. So we are not there yet in terms of neural networks. So we need further investment. How do we actually make them more and more accurate, right? And then there are challenges related to designing policies, right? I was discussing this before with somebody. So how do we evaluate, like, if it's a good model or not? How do you, for students, we know how to do this. So I can give an exam, right? And I can do the evaluation. How do you now evaluate these language models which are doing some kind of extrapolation? So it's a big challenge, and more investments are needed. So, but what I'm going to focus more today is on a direction that is being sort of coming out of this AI ML bubble in some sense, which is the digital twin, right? Where we combine this data with physics, right? So we already saw one application which was related to Apollo, and I'm going to give some more bad news, right? So then I'm going to tell you guys, can we do some fixes? So let's talk about some of the bridge failures. So we saw a few years ago in Minneapolis, right, on I-35, I believe. There was a bridge collapsed. Then again in Italy in 2018, many people died, and more recently in Dresden in Germany, also we had a bridge collapse. So the ideas that I will discuss are not limited to just bridges, but they apply in the same way to a dam. So I have a picture of a Hoover Dam. On the top right, I have a picture of an actual bridge in the lab of our collaborator at Technical University of Braunschweig in Germany, where we are actually using, we'll be using the data from this bridge, and I will come back to this. Or you can have another type of bridge, like the Infinity Bridge in UK at the bottom left, or this Vilnius Bridge in Lithuania, which is a footbridge, right? So we have done simulations for all of these bridges. How do we do simulations? And how do we bring in AI? How do we bring in data? What I'm going to do is I'm going to, come up with a discretization or some kind of model for these bridges. So here I'm showing you what goes behind, what's under the hood. So I put a discretization on top of an actual bridge or a dam, and I have created a model of this, right? So what's next? Let's focus on this bridge at Technical University in Braunschweig, which is on the left-hand side. These triangles that I showed on the previous slide, it's actually not so easy to come up with the geometry of these things and put it on a computer, right? Because there are many things going on. For example, there are solid concrete, but then if you look at the picture in the left bottom one, you also have these tendons. So how do you account for those when you're doing your model? So then we have, in the middle, you're making the sensor measurements. So you take the sensor measurements from the bridge, then you create something on the right-hand side, which is your digital model. So the sensor data from the bridge goes into a digital model. It tells you if you can find basically cracks or not on the bridge, then engineer can go and fix them, right? And let's see if this idea actually works or not. I'm going a little slow, sorry about that. So, and this is a simulation we just did. Actually, this is very recent result, last week. What you see is the top left image where the blue color corresponds to, supposed to correspond to 2 cracks, right? And we did that in on our computer. Then I asked my collaborator, can you go and actually check the bridge if there are actually those cracks or not? And he went out, right? And he saw that there are in fact 2 exact cracks. So I don't know if you can see it from that far away. One is here and one is here. But our model actually predicted them just from the sensor data. So we took that sensor data, put it in our model, and then it predicted those cracks. I mean, that's quite a eureka moment for a mathematician, at least. So there are many other areas, like we are doing the similar things for wind turbines, for example. We are working very closely with folks at Siemens. They are based in Munich, also in Princeton, in New Jersey. Why limit ourselves to ground? I started the discussion with space. So we are looking into together with my colleague. I should mention this is a joint work with many colleagues, and I'm going to mention their names shortly. So in this case, we are looking at F-117. It's re-entering. It goes from very complicated physics in the space to something even more complicated in the Earth's atmosphere. How do you simulate this properly, right? How do you design the heat shields in an appropriate way? Digital twin have significant role to play on these objects. The one at the bottom, we are working closely with my postdoc, Keegan Kirk, and colleague Alex Kaltenbach from TU Berlin. So we actually have created this is a very recent development, a digital twin lab, and our group currently consists of members of the center, and also very closely we are working with colleagues in physics, Professor Rainer Lohner, and a PhD student we are co-supervising, Facundo Airudo, also working very closely with Juan Cibral. He's a professor in bioengineering, and we are looking at the medical digital twins, actually for aneurysms. And we work closely with structural engineers at TU Munich and also TU Braunschweig. So you can see, really, we need a whole set of people who can do the actual measurements, who can do simulations, who can do mathematical ideas, right? And this lab is supported by Air Force Office of Scientific Research under the Defense University Research Instrumentation Program. And this is our actually second DURIP. The first one, we created a GPU cluster which is placed at the GMU data center and is being widely used. So there are ways to do a medical digital twinning as well, and I'm going to discuss that with Dr. Edwards, so I'm going to be brief on this slide. In particular, what we are looking at are the digital twins related to aneurysms. All right, so last thing I want to mention is another sort of technology that we have been spearheading is related to neuromorphic imaging. So if you think about traditional imaging, you get pictures like that, here, right? But many times let's say you point your camera on a wall, there is no change occurring in the wall, right? You're capturing the same information over and over and over again. Can you design a sensor in a way that you only capture the change you only register the intensity of the pixels which are changing? In that case, the data that you get looks like this, basically this blue and red dots. So you have lots of zeros, so it's a very sparse data, right? Which means you can afford to sample at a microsecond level in comparison to like a millisecond level, for instance. So you can see things which you cannot using traditional cameras. So for instance, you can see the thumb of this person here, which you cannot on the left-hand image, right? And we have put this in the digital twin framework. So we are working closely with Dr. Jeff Megarg at USAFA, United States Air Force Academy, where they've sent one of these sensors at the International Space Station, and they gave us lots of data. And then we are doing reconstructions for them for that data, and you can put this in this digital twin loop. All right, so I think I'm going to conclude that we have also created another lab where we have actual instruments. I think we are one of the only university in the US, or probably in the world, with such facilities in terms of neuromorphic imaging, where we have around 11 neuromorphic imaging sensors and multiple neuromorphic audio sensors as well. The lab is regularly visited by folks at Naval Research Lab, and we are working closely with the Air Force Institute of Technology too. So this is my last slide. Basically, you really need a sort of a different way of thinking if you want to design digital twins, right? Combining data with physics to create a digital model, and then there is a feedback loop. So that's sort of the bigger picture idea. But then there are, in terms of applications, there are many, right? I have discussed more engineering applications, but there are also a lot of biomedical applications, which we will be discussing shortly. So thank you very much.
Join me up here. Thank you. No, thank you very much, Harbir. Obviously, this is, as I suggested, fascinating research that you and your team are doing in CMAI. So we want to, of course, save much of our time for questions from the audience, and we will definitely do that. But I wanted to start with a couple of questions myself. How is, and you touched on this, I think, a little bit, but how is artificial intelligence driving advancement in the application of digital twin technology?
So yeah, absolutely. So AI, right? It's helping assimilate data into the digital twin to make more and more accurate predictions. Let's think of more in terms of the medical side, because that's something I didn't discuss, right? I can elaborate on it now. But AI combined with the digital twin can act as your primary care, for instance. And this primary care is going to be more accurate because you are not just taking your body temperature today, but you also account for the history in making your decisions. You can also possibly do real-time monitoring of a person, right? And if there is, this person is going to have a cardiac arrest, or the glucose level is going to go up or not. So think about, some people use these devices at the bottom of their arms, right? And these devices, they are regularly monitoring your glucose level, and they're collecting the data. And believe it or not, in the background, it's actually solving a differential equation. And then there is a feedback. So when it notices the glucose level goes up, it gives you a shot, basically. So AI, in particular, is helping you assimilate the data and help create the digital twin.
Fantastic. Can digital twins be used to help predict climate change and natural disasters?
Absolutely. I showed some examples today where, I was talking about these bridges where there can be cracks in the bridges, for instance. And you can identify them using digital twins and can go and fix them. But also I have colleagues, they're trying to, so actually, believe it or not, you can get data, for instance, from the seabed. So, and these are, we have lots of, for instance, cables going around all over the ocean. You can get this so-called pressure measurements from the seabed, and then you actually combine with this acoustic gravity type equations, and you can predict tsunamis, for instance. If there is an earthquake, then you measure this, you do this pressure measurements combined with your differential equations, you can do the tsunami predictions. So, and you can keep monitoring this on a regular basis. So that's already an important example. We have seen tsunamis in the last 20 years, which led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, right, in different places. But this can really benefit society in a great deal. Other thing we can think of is we can create digital twins of different topography outside, and can understand if there's going to be flooding, in which part there will be flooding, right? And this is something that we really are confronted with, right? We had recent floods in North Carolina, in Tennessee. I remember a few years ago I did a workshop in Minneapolis, and those guys. So this workshop I had organized together with ExxonMobil, and they. So the university people at University of Minnesota, they took me to this sort of research facility right on Mississippi River. So you go actually several floors down. I didn't know, they had dug something underground. And what they were trying to do there was trying to study flooding, earthquakes, and it was fascinating. These experiments were really small, but I don't know why you nowadays have to do exactly this at that level. You could do that, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't do, but you could do the same thing using digital twins too, where we can actually get the real data.
Fascinating. You touched on a little bit about I think just generally some applications of digital twin technology on healthcare, right? And obviously with the shortage of primary care physicians that we've already seen and certainly will continue to see, I think technology like this is going to take over as you mentioned it again in passing, but as your new primary care physician in some cases. So, and this is the last question for me. So what are some of the primary risks and challenges that exist when implementing digital twin technologies in the structural and healthcare sector?
So the way I see it, there are challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities. So I mentioned also during my talk that data is a big challenge, right? So if you think of the medical field, data can be very sensitive, right? So, but it also opens up opportunities on how to deal with this sensitive data. Can you use different kind of machine learning, like federated machine learning, or some kind of decentralization approach? The other challenge is how does AI basically integrates this data into your digital twin? How do we confront this problem? The other big challenge is how do we create this infrastructure? You've seen from my talk that you really need to bring a lot of people together, right? So if you want to do AI or if you want to do digital twins, so how do you create this research infrastructure or the real infrastructure where you actually bring people together? The other challenge is how do you devise regulatory plans, right? So how do you regulate AI? How do you regulate digital twins? So I'm not giving full answers, but I'm just bringing up some of the questions actually. So I'm answering a question by some of the questions here. But I feel that one has to confront these things, and there has to be investments and more discussions about these things. The other question is how do you close this loop? So I mentioned that a digital twin is like a loop, right? So you collect, there is a physical asset, you have some sensors, you're collecting the data, then you have a digital model, then there is a feedback loop. So this is fine for the bridge example that I showed, where you were collecting displacement measurements or some kind of stress measurements, and I was able to identify the crack and in the bridge. But how do you do this from the medical point of view? So I mentioned this example of monitoring the glucose level, right? So this is a prime example where you can do this relatively easily. But then there are more challenging examples. So there are certain type of brain cancers, for instance, which you cannot just capture using MRIs, especially if the cancer spreads in the brain matter, right? So what people are trying to do is combine their MRI scans with differential equations, and then that's how they're creating this digital twin model. Again, you can, like a medical doctor, right? You cannot expect them to do everything by themselves. So you really need to bring some good mathematicians to do that. People are trying to use this for arrhythmia as well. And like more sort of simplistic scenario is monitoring the cholesterol level of a person, like on a sort of regular basis, to have the appropriate intervention at an appropriate time, for instance. But I think the opportunities are a lot in terms of developing new mathematics. That's what I'm always looking for, but also helping people, right? This can provide access to a fancy doctor sitting in New York to somewhere in Wyoming, right? So if they can interact with them on if this person has a digital twin, maybe they can interact with this doctor more comfortably with more appropriate amount of sort of history and the data, rather than flying over or yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, as promised, I definitely want to save the bulk of our time for Q&A from the audience, so we'll turn it over now. We have 2 microphones, so please don't ask your question until you get the microphone, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for questions. So, listen, right up front, I think was the first question. Coming your way from the left.
Thank you very much. As I listen to what you have shared, my brain interprets what you've said. The neurons and so forth compare with things that I have learned and know, and out of that I learn what has happened. Now that's the way in which I interpret my brain works in the neurons. Now we got the artificial part of this. And I am curious. Got a pretty good idea what happens inside the neurons and so forth, and the electrical impulses and that. On the artificial side, and the micro inspection of what's happening, how does that work? You have shown I can use it to do this, I can predict that, I can look at this bridge and see where the cracks are going to be and so forth. That's fine. But what happens to cause that result on a minute level like my brain?
So there are basically 2 sort of ways I will try to answer your question. So first is there a and I hope I understood your question correctly. Is there a way of representing like the AI within this, like the actual neuromorphic framework that occurs in our brain? And yes, that is there is a way of representing, and that's what we call deep neural networks, for instance, right? So there are actually that's what we call a deep neural network. There are layers that one can create, right? And within these layers, there are points which we call the neurons, and then when we do the learning, when we are training this neural network, what we are trying to understand is what is the mapping between what we are inputting in this neural network and what is the output of this neural network. And this is precisely what we are trying to understand. What goes in between, right? What is the minute thing that occurs? That we are trying to replicate the behavior of our neurons with this help of this artificial neural network, or ANN, or you can call it deep neural network, or whatever you want to call it. But the goal is to try to learn this mapping between the input data and the output data with the help of interpreting these neurons in a certain way, interpreting these data points in a certain way. So absolutely, there is an analog for that. There is a mathematical framework for that, and people have really studied this deeply at this point. There is a whole mathematical literature, but also people have really analyzed this in practice. How well does it work on certain problems? It's really good at classification, like imaging technology, right? Now, if you go to airport, for instance, we don't use our IDs anymore. Most of the times, it's just your facial recognition, right? Or your cell phone. You can unlock your cell phone with the facial recognition. So it works very well for these type of problems, but it does not work for all the problems, right? It's easy to break it. I mentioned this question. If you ask this AI to create a picture of a left-hand side person, it most of the time creates the picture of a right-handed person. I asked the other day, I was playing with it, Llama, can you solve my nonlinear differential equation? And it actually gave me a reasonable answer. And I'm going to use more technical terms now. It said, okay, you can use Newton's method. I was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. And then I was like, how do you do it? It's like, oh, you can do some iterations, right? You can iterate. I was like, what is the iteration? And then it just went in the circles, right? And then it just so it broke down. So absolutely. So the answer is there is a way to do this. And when it comes to some of the application that I was talking about, like finding this crack formulation, this is exactly what I'm bringing in another layer now, which is physics. So I not only have a neural network and the data, but I'm also keeping things more realistic by combining it with physics, where I have a much more deeper knowledge. I have much more deeper principles, because we still don't fully understand, even though we have come a long way, but we still don't fully understand why this neural network don't work when they don't work, right? And how to actually fix them. But if you combine it with physics, where we know precisely what the laws are, that's one way of making them more accurate, actually. You're welcome.
My question is, I'm sorry. My question is related to more of a practical side of things and more of a medical side of things. And that is that how do you know how many iterations or how many pairings you have to do with your digital twins, before you have a substantive answer? And the other thing is, I'm thinking citizen science. Doesn't it take like symptoms in the medical field to tell you about a specific problem, and collecting maybe from people their data of how they got to the point of that illness, like their blood pressure, their blood sugar levels for a certain amount of historical time, and things, what they were doing, what they ate, and that kind of thing. How does that play into it?
So let me start with the second question, right? That's that's one of the goals of trying to create digital twins for humans, for instance, more on the preventative medicine side, right? Rather than like a response, but try to be on the preventative side. So we can, the eventual goal is to monitor this on a daily basis, on a minute by minute basis. And this is possible in some cases. This example that I mentioned with the diabetes, for instance, right? One can, with this device, you can really, check your glucose level every few minutes or so, and then react accordingly. But this is what one wants to do with cholesterol level or blood pressure level, that over the period, initially it's not going to be super accurate, but over the period it's going to start behaving like the actual person and can actually predict interventions. So that's the goal. And then I think your first question was, how do we know how accurate you are, right? And that's exactly what we do as mathematicians. We try to come up with markers, some kind of estimates, and realize actually, let's say, if you stop early, you talk about iterations. If you stop your iterations early, what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks? How much are you losing? So we develop this notion of what we call adaptivity, right? Where if you stop early, you precisely know how much you're going to lose, right? Or if you can, it really depends on the amount of resources that you have. So for instance, if I'm running my program on a computer, right, I cannot run my program. I only have limited amount of resources. Maybe I'm limited by by Cody, right? He's like, oh, I can only pay so much of your electricity bill, right? So I can run my computer for these many hours. I mean, he's never done that, but I'm just
I think I would be a liability.
Yes. But when we design our algorithms, actually we build this we take this into account, and we design our algorithms which are adaptive. So we know if I do 10 iterations, I will precisely know what the inaccuracy is, right? So.
Yes.
I think is it on? So my question is, and I hope you will indulge me in the weeds, if you will. But my question is, AI is only as good as the data that goes into it, right? To what extent do you worry about or account for the human error that goes into the data that feeds your AI?
So absolutely. So this is something that I didn't touch on I talked about it a little bit, but didn't get into too much detail. So this is a serious problem, right? And that's why I'm going to repeat myself now. That for the sort of this engineering problems, for the physics problems, we also try to bring in more physics knowledge into the picture, not just rely completely on data, right? But even there can be big issues. For instance, your data is corrupted. I have a 5-year-old. He went around and he maybe changed some of the labels, right? Which he would do, because if I tell him not to do this, he's going to do that. Of course, exactly the same thing. So, how do you confront this? So, what we are developing, and some other groups are too, is precisely to tackle those scenarios. Actually, corruption in the data. What if you don't know if there is any kind of pattern or what the underlying distribution is in your data? How do you deal with those scenarios? So recently we have developed a mathematical framework to confront these type of problems. Precisely this type of question. Happy to share article with you. So that's one thing, right? So in a more technical term, we have developed a new framework for optimization, because when you're training these neural networks, right, you are doing a lot of optimization in the background. So we have developed sort of a new notion which we call the Rockefellian. It's named after a famous optimizer, Terry Rockefeller, which can handle these scenarios where you have a corruption in your data, where you don't know the underlying distribution. And the other thing is that we are also, we and some other groups are also trying to use this idea of risk measures when you do the training. So, traditionally, right, we go and do, so our typical, I'm getting into the weeds too because you brought that up. So typically one would go and compute the average, right, and minimize this so-called empirical risk that's what your loss is. But why is that good enough? So if you think of the average, so when I think of average, I usually go to my normal distribution, which is like a bell-shaped curve, right? Average sits somewhere in the middle. That's what the average would be. What if you have outliers which are hiding in the tail of your distribution? So we talked about digital twins. I mean, tsunamis are not that frequent, right? These are rare events, but maybe there are these rare events which are hiding in the tail of your distribution. How do you account for those type of distributions? So it turned out some of the finance people on the Wall Street actually, they're not super liked always, but they actually come up with really nice mathematical theories. In particular, develop this notion of risk measure, which is the average of the tail of your distribution. So in your training, can you account for this tail of your distribution, which accounts for the outliers? So two things, risk measures, and also developing or using this notion that we have developed, this Rockefellian notion during your training process, which can account for corrupted data and also corrupted distribution.
Quick question?
Have somebody with it? Absolutely, thank you, sorry.
1 second.
Yeah, absolutely.
The U.S. Geological Survey routinely monitors seismic activity in relation to potential earthquakes. Does the Geological Survey know about the Digital Twins Lab, and have they coordinated any activities with the Geological Survey in Reston?
So that's really nice. Nice to know they are doing that. So far I have not contacted them, but I have contacted 2 people. This is part of our very recent paper which just appeared actually 2 weeks ago, where when I was talking about these bridges, right? So we, of course, if you think of the bridge, it's not just in vacuum, right? It's impacted by sun, it's impacted by shadow, by rain, by snow. So you have to account for the thermal effects too. So previously we were not doing that actually. But a few months ago when we account for the so-called thermal stresses in our models now, and we reached out to, and we actually saw that the US Transportation Authority, Highway Transportation Authority, and the New Zealand Highway Transportation Authority have their guidelines, which you can find online. And they suggest that in your models, you should account for these thermal effects as well, not just your elasticity effects. And then we wrote to them that can we actually cite them in our paper, and they said absolutely. In fact, some of their guidelines are quite old, and they're in the process of updating their guidelines. And they said, can you send your paper to us so we can actually update our models based on your paper, based on your research. So these things are happening like very quickly. So they are now actually, they might end up using our work. So if we make the same gesture to the folks that you are mentioning, I believe they will be willing to listen. So from my experience, right? So if you talked to me 5 years ago, I was just mostly doing pen and paper work. The last few years, I started collaborating with more domain scientists, with my colleagues here at GMU, like Professor Lohner and Juan Cibral. I feel that engineers are extremely smart people. In fact, a lot of mathematical ideas actually came from engineers, and they're always open-minded. They're always willing to collaborate with you as long as you can show what you are saying could be useful, as long as you can convince them. So we seem like we were able to convince the highway authorities in 2 different countries, but it's possible that they will end up using some of our stuff too. But we have to reach out. Actually, this is a really good point that you brought. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. This is really interesting. For the layperson that maybe doesn't even understand artificial intelligence, Mike, and you said earlier that the digital twin models are based on artificial intelligence. Nowadays, you Google something, usually AI information comes in first. My question is, how can we authenticate or even find out what that artificial intelligence is telling us, where it's coming from?
I see. So you mean like you type something, you're getting something, right? If I do Google search now, at the top, right, you get the AI response.
Correct.
And then you get the usual hyperlinks from
Correct.
Google. So you are asking like where is that information coming from, right?
Yes, where's that data coming from? Now, in your examples, it's medical data coming in, it's engineering data, it's measurements like that, right? So I guess there's some sense of, I don't know, accuracy or
Right.
whatever you want to call it, but it is
Right.
artificial intelligence data. So I guess I'm asking more of a broader question, and maybe even in the work that you do, how do you know that that artificial intelligence information you're getting is authentic, and how can you know where it's coming from?
Right. I think that's a challenge, and I believe, I don't know if there is a easy answer to this question, right? It really depends on the model. So OpenAI, for instance, uses a certain data set to train their large language models. Google uses something else. Now Meta is using something else, right? And this is why I feel this is where this DeepSeek came in, for instance, that we heard about a few weeks ago, where they actually put out everything, all their weights, and everything is now open source, right? But most of these other models are not open source at present. They don't, as far as I know, I don't know everything, right? That they don't disclose like how they actually did the training. Whatever the answers you are getting, most of it is based on the data they use for training. But if they don't disclose, then it's not so clear actually where this is coming from. This is why I am, being in academia, right? We try to make everything open access, and this is significantly, and encouraged by the funding agencies as well. So we publish papers, we publish our data, and that's one of the reasons I really like the fact that what DeepSeek did. I'm not saying you guys should install DeepSeek on your laptop or computer. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not allowed to, first of all. But I'm just saying that I wish they make this open source so that I can answer your question in a more detailed way rather than going around and around, honestly. So I don't have a direct answer. I do know some of the mathematics that goes behind training these algorithms, but again, the results that you're seeing a lot depend on the data that is trained on. Yeah. Tree? Please.
Yes, I'm wondering about the military applications of AI. I noticed that we have a drone war, real violent, between Russia and Ukraine, where a $500,000 drone kills a $5 million tank. So what do you see as developing in what's unfortunately a part of human history and human nature, war?
So I was talking to some intelligence people last week actually, and because I was in a meeting with them, and they are looking at this very, very seriously, right? But also they're cautious because we know that this AI technologies, they do make a lot of mistakes too, right? So when we talk about drones, for instance, it's not fully based on AI. I mean, there are lots of other principles that are inbuilt in there. So as far as I know, there's no fully AI-based drones out there. Maybe there are, which I don't have the what do you say, the security level to know about, right? So I think it's worth thinking about in those directions, and people are making significant effort, but they are very cautious. So I work very closely with the Navy people, for instance, right? So I have funding from ONR, and I work closely with the folks in Dahlgren and also at Naval Research Lab. And they've tried it for many problems, but it's it works, as I said, it works in certain cases. It's really good at classification problems. So if you say, if you put your AI to classify a tank from a Humvee or something, right? So I will trust. But if you say I'm going to do my trajectory optimization of my of my drone using AI, then I will have certain doubts. So you need to integrate it with something else, right? And that's where it can shine, in my opinion. So, but people are taking it very, very seriously, and there are lots of investment. But I think we shouldn't forget about other things, right? So I mentioned Naval Research Lab. So one of the projects we are looking with them right now is so this group of physicists, they were able to find a way to bend light. So we know that there are a couple of ways of bending light. You can pass the light through a prism, for instance, or you can use gravity to bend light. But they found another way, right? And then they approached me, like, can you help me actually? Can I help them to actually come up with a model, right? Like a mathematical model. So, and then we were able to derive actually some equations, and it turns out those equations are not too far from the equations that we see like with airflow, right, which is like the Navier-Stokes equations. But here they're a bit more complicated. So, and now the question is, how do you actually simulate those equations on a computer? So the goal is, they are seeing the bending of light up to a certain distance, but will this light keep on bending, right? But they are limited by the space they have in the lab. But in my model, I can go beyond what they have in their experiments, right? We cannot expect these kind of things for AI to be able to do this type of stuff. I think we need that, and that also has a lot of military applications. In fact, there's a whole classified part of that project which I have no idea, I don't know anything about, and I don't even want to know, but there is a really exciting mathematical development, physics development that is taking place in that direction. Yeah.
One more question? All right, we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Make sure you please speak into the microphone so they can pick you up on GNU
Sure.
TV.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So thank you for the presentation, Dr. Antil. And my question is going back to the bridge, right? It was exciting to see that your digital twin was able to predict where the cracks are, and they were able to confirm. Were you able to determine using your model why the cracks appeared where they did? Because that would speak to the ability to make better bridges in the future. So if you can speak a little more on that.
So what we are looking for in our model, the pictures that I showed you, more technical terms, we are inverting in our from the measurements in our elasticity equation, we are inverting for the Young's modulus, right? So if the Young's modulus is very small, we have scaled everything between 0 and 1. If it's close to 0, then we say that there is a crack, and if it's close to 1, then we say there is no crack, right? So you can think about now designing materials according to this principle, for instance. That's one potential way. The other thing that I didn't talk too much about today is, so if you see the crack, right, then the engineer can go and inspect it and fix it, right? Maybe with with a chisel or hammer or something like that. But are there other ways? So the other ways we are exploring right now is keep your simulation going, right? So we try to, we have measurements from before when the bridge was intact. So you can, bring those displacement measurements and try to recreate those displacement measurements by adding more material to your bridge. This can be again cast as an optimization problem, what we call the topology optimization problem. So now I take a bridge, for instance, I put it in a larger domain, with some material, and then I let and my goal is to obtain my original displacement. So I let my code run, and I'm allowed to add new material, right? Not allowed to take out material from the bridge, but this material that I have surrounded it by. So what we saw in our simulation that it built additional support structures around the bridge to actually help overcome this issue with the crack. And I think it's worth thinking about some of these ideas because if the bridge, right, if it's not functional anymore, it's actually quite expensive to tear it down and rebuild another one, right? And it's not also environmental friendly, right? So there are lots of ways of tackling this question actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you didn't get to ask a question, don't worry. Again, we can continue our conversation over drinks and food. So please, again, join me in thanking Harbir.